And welcome back to the Standard Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Jono, and my co-host and partner in crime, Chris, is with me again today.
I'm his partner in crime.
I said crime, you,
I'm the partner in crime.
you jackass. So today's
What's up, media
episode, we're
crimes?
yes. So we're talking about draft strategies in today's episode. We wanted to highlight after we've been talking about sleeper picks and breakout picks and busts, and we've been talking about in all our shorts all these players we like a lot and who we draft them over, etc. But we haven't really talked about draft strategy, and especially in a standard scoring league, which hopefully everybody who's listening in here is a standard scoring league player, but those who aren't, it is the way to go. It is the way to play, and we're going to give you great advice on how to win your drafts year in and year out. Between the two of us, we've had multiple success and championship visits and championship victories across multiple leagues by following these draft strategies and tips and tricks. So before we get into it, don't forget, like and subscribe. Hit that notification button so you hear all the updates come to your phone or your computer or your email, wherever it may go, for whenever we drop new videos and shorts. That being said, let's go. Draft strategy. First one I want to kind of talk about here is one that I don't tend to follow. I did it one season, and it probably was my worst season because you can quickly falter if you don't get the right guys, and that is zero RB. Zero RB meaning that you fade drafting a running back for at least the first 4 rounds. And so you're looking to get your receivers, you're looking to get a quarterback or a tight end and really build on those other positions till at least the 5th round. And then you're finally taking a running back. And that could hurt you if you have a running back heavy drafting league. Because, you may gobble up all these good guys, the Jeffersons, your Waddle, and then you got yourself some home run at quarterback and a good tight end. But if you don't have a sustainable running back back there and you have a split carry running back, that's what happened to me that season, and one injury away at running back position and you're done. Those guys can't sustain the points from you week to week. I don't like to follow it anymore, but I could see, depending upon where you are in the draft, especially if you maybe are in the 11th or 12th spot, you have a chance to get 2 top 10 wide receivers under your belt right away, and then coming around get another quarterback and a tight end. And then that 5th round, you're looking at your running back. It could be possibly a good spot to take this draft strategy.
Yeah, I'm typically not a big fan of this one either. Now, there's years I've done it where I've not drafted a running back until the 4th round, where I think that's a decent strategy to do if you hit the right players. But that's the big thing, is like, it's a big if. It's so much easier to hit the mid-tier receivers than it is to hit mid-tier running backs, because the top end running backs are at least going to have just high floors for you. So you get that consistency. And even we've seen this even last year with Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams. There were weeks where they just disappear, or they have sub 10-point games, and then you rely on that player in your first round to be your consistency. And that's really always what I look for, at least with how I draft. But with a zero running back strategy, it can be effective, like Jono said, especially at if you're 10, 11, 12. The year I did, I think I was 5, and I went Devontae Adams, and then I can't remember who else I went with. But I didn't go running back until like the 3rd round on it. But I went, quarterback. Maybe I might have went quarterback and gotten Mahomes or Deshaun Watson's MVP year. I don't remember. But regardless, if you're in the 10, 11, 12 spot and you have a chance to go and get 2 elite wide receivers, or you have a chance to get like Travis Kelce and then an elite wide receiver, there are interesting things you can do, because if you go and get you're an elite tight end, an elite quarterback, an elite wide receiver, but then in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round, you draft just heavy running back there. Like, the zero running back strategy is effective if, when you start drafting running backs, you go on a 4-round tear of just taking the best running back available. And
Yeah.
you better leave the draft with 4 or 5 running backs that you are going to be playing matchup based and trying to play the best play. The beauty about having at least one high end running back is at least you have one position there. Like you don't have to worry about a flex guy, running back you could throw in your flex, but you do have a guy that you're playing with one position versus two. And that's kind of how I look at my team and roster management is like, how can I how can I set in stone the most slots per position? Like if I know I have Jalen Hurts at quarterback, like I don't ever have to sub another quarterback in. If I know I have Christian McCaffrey at running back, I at least have one of my 2 running back slot. So if you have elite positions, but you have 2 running back slots that you have to fill, it's better to have at least one of those filled where it's an every week starter. You know what you're going to get with him. And then that second position is somewhere you can play matchup based. Because if you're playing matchup based with 2 positions, there's going to be weeks where you dud on both. Like it's just not as predictive as you would think, even with opportunity, especially in standard. You are more reliant on touchdowns, and the consistency for touchdowns is better with running backs than it is wide receivers.
Yeah.
So that I've really very rarely run a 0 running back strategy. I think that there are better strategies out there than 0 running back.
Yeah, I mean, I did the 0 running back, I think, in 2016, and I loved my 0 running back strategy, and it would have been perfect. But I said it again, an injury away from really screwing you over, and then if you get in a position where you're going to have to make a move and trade for somebody, and then you just completely dismantle that 0 running back draft that you did. I mean, I went Julio Jones, Mike Evans, Sammy Watkins, 3 absolute studs. Sammy Watkins, that was the year of that foot injury where he barely played. So now I'm down to 2 wide receivers. All right. I had Jeremy Hill and Melvin Gordon as my top 2 running backs. And this was when a young Derrick Henry was in there, so it wasn't how he was before. Luckily, I had Stephon Diggs kind of stepping up a little bit, but it was a late draft on him. I had to trade away somebody, one of my receivers, early to get my running game up, and I traded a little bit too early because the week I traded, the week after, Sammy Watkins was out, and now I was left with one receiver, and that was Julio Jones. And that was it. And so I was just riddled completely across the board. I was scrapping together waiver wire. So you do expose yourself, but you can also be just a beast when it comes week to week with points. If you get 3 guys that just are putting up 1,400 yard, 10 plus touchdown seasons, like it's going to be hard to beat you.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, but you still need to hit on at least one of those mid-tier running backs where at least they become a more consistent guy.
Well, and I did that year. Melvin Gordon.
A good strategy for 0 running back is to go and get some of these rookies that might end up taking the starting role mid-season or early on in the season, because then you can get them low in the draft. You can stack those guys and say, all right, now mid-season comes around or late season comes around, like my wide receiver play can get me to the playoffs, but how am I going to win a championship? Right.
Yeah.
It's not about winning the early season. It's about winning late in the season. So if you go and draft these high end wide receivers, you can go and get these guys that'll come on late. Like Brian Robinson last year was consistent, and he was a guy that you could have drafted in a 0 running back strategy. ETN went higher than you would have liked. Like for him, but we've talked about other guys.
Ramondre Stevenson went late in the draft too. Would have been solid for you.
Stevenson went late.
Well, let me bring up a couple names that are in that 5th, 6th, 7th range round that you would get, and we're looking based on sleeper ADP right now. You're looking at Dameon Pierce. Wouldn't be a bad option to have as a running back. You're looking at Miles Sanders. You're looking at James Conner right now. Cam Akers. Like those are 4 names right there that I'd be comfortable as my RB1, and then even Rashad White's on this list too. Like you fill with 2 of those guys. Like I said before, you get James Conner, Cam Akers, you're in a
at
position.
Least one of them's going to hit, right?
Yeah, you're going to be success. They're going to get volume. You're going to be successful in the running game. It's not going to be where you're going to win your weeks at running back, but you're going to win your weeks at wide receiver, and you're going to win your weeks, with your quarterback or your
but they're not going to lose you weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and that's the thing is like, how can we get consistent at each position?
Yeah.
And so and go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, let's move on from zero
Yeah.
RB because I mean, think there's not much else we could say about it. But let's go to another one it rhymes with zero RB, and that's hero RB. This is the mentality in the draft that I'm going to go grab my running back in the first round, and then I'm not going to draft another running back till later. I'm going to fill in with absolute talent everywhere else, and then I'll grab a running back later in the sixth, seventh round, so that I can get all my other positions filled out to the teeth. So this is a situation. It's actually a really decent situation if you're in the 1, 2, or 3 spot in the draft because you're going to get one of those absolute beasts. And then come in the second round, third round, the best value is going to be at wide receiver for you or quarterback or tight end, where you want to take that value and not try and load up on running backs because those other running backs that you can get, like we just said, Connor and Akers and somebody are going to be equal in value almost to those guys at the tail end of that second round. And they'll have the opportunity to be that. So you go with the hero RB, you take yourself another solid wide receiver. Then on the turn, you get yourself, one of the top quarterbacks, or you get yourself one of the top tight ends if you haven't already done so. And now you've got 3 skill positions in your offense, and then you just build from there.
Yeah, this is another strategy I'm not particularly a fan of. I don't like waiting that long because you never know, especially if you're in the front half or the back half or the front 4 picks or the back 4 picks of the draft, is there can be runs on people and you don't want to be at the tail end of that. So
Mm-hmm.
if you go and get a hero running back, like last year I didn't do this strategy because I ended up taking Elijah Mitchell in the 3rd round, but I got Christian McCaffrey at the 4th pick, and then I got Elijah Mitchell at the 3rd, and then Ramondre at the 6th. So like I was spacing them out. Like I want to go and get running backs. Like I want to go and get guys.
Yeah.
Um, but if you're sitting there at the 3rd pick and you go run, I'm perfectly fine just getting one running back, and then you go to the 4th round or the 3rd round and it's going the other way, and you just went wide receiver, or wide receiver, tight end, or wide receiver, quarterback, whatever. You didn't go another running back, and then all of a sudden there's just a run on running backs. You have 24 picks until it's coming back to you,
Yeah.
and you are like, if 20 of those running backs are gone, you're looking at the 4th round, and you might be looking at guys like, all right, I'm getting flex plays, and you're going to be almost forced to have to go and get a player like that. Now it's very rare that you'll see like massive runs like that, but you'll see runs on like tight ends and wide receivers, but you'll see runs especially in the 4th and 5th round on those second tier running backs. And if you're at the tail end of that and you miss out on like the players that we just listed, for the zero running back strategy, right?
Yeah.
If you go hero running back and you get one, and your plan is to go and get another decent running back, and you miss out on Cam Akers and Connor, you're
Yeah,
left
you're
with
looking
more
at Rashad Penny, Zach Charbonnet, Khalil Herbert,
right.
P. Ryan, although we do like P. Ryan stuff. Then you're looking at Damian Harris. You're looking at the guys who are in split backfields, or they're the 3rd down pass catching guy like a McKinnon or a Singletary, where you don't know. You're way more exposed. Way more exposed.
It's a strategy that you can use. If I'm going hero running back, I don't stick to I typically won't stick to the strategy of I'm not touching another running back until the 5th or 6th round. Like I'll go hero running back in the 1st round, and maybe go the next 2 rounds go wide receiver, tight end. But I'm always going to go and try to get that next tier of guy. I'm going to go and try to fill my position there because it's easier to, it's easier to get like a top 15 quarterback later in the draft, or go and get these receivers. Like we've talked about, there's the top 10 receivers every year. There's so much turnover, and guys you can get in the 6th to 8th round that are going to be productive. But it's difficult to get a running back down there unless there's an injury that happens, or they're a rookie that people are sleeping on.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example. So I did hero running back in 2020. I went Saquon Barkley 2nd overall in the draft, And this, like I said, this is a position that you kind of, it lends better to it. And I ended up going Chris Godwin, Kenny Galladay, Keenan Allen. And then on that turn, I said I need to get a running back, and I went with DeAndre Swift, a young rookie who I was high on. And it helped out because he had a decent season. But again, if he did not, then I'm sitting there with one big running back. Yeah, I like my 3 receivers because that was Kenny Galladay's big season with the Lions before he went to the Giants. But again, after that, you got to hope that you have another running back that you hit on. And I think if I look at what I did after that, I can't read who this running back was. I think I had Kyler Murray. I had Darrell Henderson, late Justin Jackson. I really didn't have anybody else outside of that. So I was running, I was, really thin at that point. Now I think the league's a little bit different even then from back there because you have a lot more competent running backs throughout the league a little later on. But yeah, I agree with you. You got to, and we're going to talk a little bit about draft strategy anyway on what we say, sticking to a plan or letting the draft come to you, and which we like better. But, hero running back is a viable way to do it, especially in standard, if you're in those first couple picks, because the value in those second, third, fourth rounds are going to be lend better to your wide receivers, in your high scoring wide receivers. Yeah. But as we always say, it's easier to find those good, solid wide receivers in the 5th, 6th, 7th round than it is to find a running back in those rounds.
Well, here's the thing. And so we talked about the zero running back. We talked about hero running back. And sticking with the running back trend, let's talk about stacking running back.
Running back heavy.
Okay. This is my favorite strategy.
Yep,
and everyone in my league knows it. This is one of my favorite things to do, and I've had my most successful seasons doing this. Is 1, 2, 3, 4, all running back. I'm taking the best available. I'm going to take my guy, and because I'm doing this strategy, I can go and reach for guys in the 1st or 2nd round, knowing that like the next 4 rounds I'm going to go and get the best available. Because if I'm throwing darts at a board, like, and I'm going the first 4 rounds on my best available running backs, then at least 2 of them are going to hit. And if the other 2 don't hit, they're at least going to be decent enough that I can trade away 4 wide receivers that I would get at that position anyway. Yep. But the thing is, if you hit on multiple of them, then you can go and make any trade you want. So
or you just run the league.
Or you just run the league. I mean, my second best statistical season and my first championship in our league that I won, because for the first 6 years of the league I was like first place 4 times but got knocked out in the first round. But my first championship run, I drafted Zeke his rookie year, Le'Veon Bell 2nd round, and then DeMarco Murray in the 3rd round. And I had the league leading rusher with DeMarco Murray in the 3rd round, and I had Zeke his rookie year in Dallas, where he was just dominant.
No, so you went Zeke, Le'Veon, Amari Cooper, DeMarco Murray,
Amari Cooper,
and then DeMarco Murray
in there.
Yeah,
Amari. So and I ended up trading away DeMarco Murray because how successful Zeke and how successful Le'Veon were, where I struggled at quarterback that season and at wide receiver. So I ended up, I think, trading DeMarco Murray away for OBJ and Tom Brady. And with a running back that's doing that you hit on that in the 3rd or 4th round, you can trade those players away later in the season, especially if you have 2 studs.
Yeah.
Now it's sometimes helpful just hold on to them in case you have an injury or anything. You can always flex that guy. But if you're desperate and you don't hit at the other positions where you're putting up decent numbers, at least you have the flexibility to trade those guys down the road for the positions that you're deficient at.
Well, that same for zero RB is like you have the opportunity to trade one of those 3 wide receivers, too as well. If you end up picking a solid 3 wide receivers and they all 3 hit, you could stick with them. But if you have an injury or something else is going on, you want to get a new quarterback or something, you can leverage one of those 3 guys and still not break your team up completely and build it up instead. So I agree with you on that one. I don't tend to do it that often. I've done it before. But I've also found that, you don't win your championship off the draft. We know that, and we'll talk about that more too. So setting yourself up for success and being able to manage a great team is the way to do it. And
Right.
so this does that if you hit on all three of those running backs. You didn't go running back, which is a true running back heavy in that league when you first won it, but you've done that in the past leagues, in past seasons too. And when you've done that, I think you've hit one time, but you've also missed one time with one of those running backs, and then you put yourself in a tough position. But
Right.
again, you can clean up the mess that you make by still drafting solid receivers in the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th round, because there's going to be still value there as well. So let's talk about 2 more strategies before we kind of give our thoughts and notes on tips and tricks for drafts that we found to be successful year after year. And we'll talk about these 2 quick. One of them is quarterback king drafting, and that's taking a quarterback in the first round. They're the highest scoring player in fantasy football. There's nobody else that's going to score more points in a season than a quarterback. And if you want to get that Josh Allen, you want to get that Pat Mahomes, you want to get that Lamar Jackson, whoever you covet to be the main guy, you take him in the first round, i.e. when you took Peyton Manning and his record-breaking season. It's just when you do something like that, you set the precedent. Not only do you set the precedent for your team, because now you lock in your keystone of your offense for fantasy, but it also starts to make people sweat a little bit because somebody already took a quarterback off the board and I want to get this guy. I don't want to miss out. So you kind of also can shift the draft around. I don't recommend it myself, and that's purely because I think depending upon where you are in the draft, it could really hinder you and handicap you a little bit. But to me, if you're the 10th, 11th, 12th pick, if you're like, I want a quarterback in the first 2 rounds, why not take him in the first round for your first pick before somebody comes around and steals him from you?
So Peyton was the only year that I did this. And I think he's the only year that I ever drafted a quarterback in the first 3 rounds. But you're right.
No,
like,
you took Aaron Rodgers 3rd round one year. I was just looking it up.
Okay. So I took him in the 3rd.
And MVP season for him that year too. So you hit both times you did it.
Of course. And this is the point that I was going to bring up on that, is that if you have just a gut feeling on a player and you're like, the stars are aligned, this guy is going to have a breakout season, and it could be whoever you feel like, everyone's going to have a different opinion of it. Go and draft that guy, especially a quarterback, because there are years, even so the year Tom Brady had Randy Moss, I drafted Tom Brady that year. The first year that he had Randy Moss, I drafted Tom Brady that year. And it was in a PPR league, and I think I went my first 3 picks. I went Randy Moss, Gronk, Tom Brady, and it was just like
silly.
You're stacked.
That's silly.
You're stacked there. Like, good luck beating me. But like with quarterback, getting like the hero, being at the front end and starting the trend. And you'll hear us talk about this when we're talking about drafting, as being the starting of trends, not the ending of trends. And quarterback is one of those where there's only a handful of elite guys. So if there's a guy that you want there, go and get him early. If you want Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes and you're not willing to spend a 2nd round pick on them, then there are going to be a lot of times where you're not going to end up with them. If you wanted Lamar Jackson, but you're not willing to go get him in the first 3 or 4 rounds, then you're not going to get
him. Well, let me just put it right here with sleeper ADP. They're saying right now 3 quarterbacks would go in the first 2 rounds, and that's
right.
Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. So if you're at the tail end of the draft and you want Hurts, he's not going to make it to you in the 3rd round per se. And if say you're in the 9th pick and somebody really wants Jalen Hurts in 10th, 11th, or 12th round, or 10th, 11th, 12th pick on that turnaround, that's 6 picks you got to sweat yourself if you want to get him or not. Do you really care about that ninth pick that much more for that running back or wide receiver, or do you want Jalen Hurts that badly on your team?
Yeah, I mean, let's kind of use that example. Let's say you're picking at the tail end of the 2nd round. And
tail end 2nd round or tail end 1st round?
Tail end of the 2nd round.
So early in the 1st round, because I'm talking about going hero QB here. So you're going to take your QB in the 1st round.
All right. So let's say you're you're well, that's not the example I wanted to bring up. But let's use that. If you're
Yeah,
going,
just say you're
you're a
not
QB,
you're pick 9 or 10 here.
so you pick 9 or 10, and let's say
According to
nine goes.
according to ADP, Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson would be there for you. According to ADP, not how your league drafts.
Right.
So that
So
means that you're getting fourth and fifth best.
right. So well, let's just say you're at the tail end of the first round, and uh, you draft at the ninth position, and you go and get a running back there, and then Pat Mahomes goes, Josh Allen goes in the swing to you.
Yeah.
It's going to set a domino effect of people going and getting a quarterback. So if your cutoff is like my top three guys or Jalen Hurts is that next guy, if you don't draft him there in the second round, you're not getting him. And you're going to be left with that next tier of guys. But the truth is that next tier of guys might not even be there. So it can blow up your strategy. So either you go and get a guy in the first round that you really, really want, or you risk not getting the top tier of guys, and then
Yeah.
you're overpaying for a player that you can get much later.
Well, and you look at it here in terms of position. Say you're on the 9th or 10th. It's saying Saquon or Bijan right there, 9th or 10th, versus coming around, you would be at the, I think that makes it the 16th pick is Pat Mahomes here. But if you're afraid that 10th, 11th, or 12th pick on the swing around that second round, they're going to take Pat Mahomes, or they're going to take Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen, or all three of them are going to take him, I'd rather pick that quarterback if I really covet it that much, and then take Nick Chubb and be happy with Nick Chubb at that pick right there.
Right.
Or Josh Jacobs.
If you go and get that quarterback, the next two guys after you might be like, oh, I'm going to go grab a quarterback.
And then somebody falls to you.
Exactly. This isn't my favorite strategy. Like, I'd rather go and get – so the way I kind of look at my quarterbacks is I'll break them down into tiers. And if I don't get anyone in my top tier, like, I'll usually wait.
Yeah, me too. I'm the same way.
But my top tier is, like, I'll kind of read how the draft is going. Other than the 2 years that I've drafted a quarterback high in the first 3 rounds, I think Jalen I picked last year in the fifth round.
Fifth round.
Yep. But you started to see the trend of like guys that were going, right? So you saw, Lamar Jackson go, you saw Burrow go, you saw
Herbert
go.
I think I took Herbert in the 4th right before you took Hurts in the 5th.
Right. So when you start to see those guys go, you're like, all right, well, my clock's on. Like, so the ticking clock is on. And if there's a guy, if Hurts is the tail end of your elite quarterbacks, if you're not picking him when you see 3 other guys go in front of you, you're going to lose out on him because someone else after you that doesn't have a quarterback yet is going to go and say, you know what, I'm just going to go get him.
And we'll finish up talking about this one and talk about the last one. It's kind of in the same plane, but let me just put a little note out there. Our highest winning percentage manager in our league for the past 10 seasons, has drafted a quarterback more often in the first round than any other league member. And he's successful every single year. So you can still do it by doing it. He took Aaron Rodgers a ton. He took Pat Mahomes in the first round too as well. Like he wanted to get that guy that's going to get him a chance for 40 touchdowns. It's going to get him a chance for almost 5,000 yards. And that sets you apart because that quarterback can also win you a week. Having a quarterback that can put up almost 40 points every week wins you a week. It makes up for anything you may miss.
Yeah. And that was Jalen Hurts for me. That was Aaron Rodgers the year before for me. You go and get a guy that, when you get that elite guy, they're going to win you weeks because they're throwing up 35 points. And then even if you're getting just consistent 10-point floors from everyone else, it's going to be enough to win you weeks. And then all you need is one other player to have a blow-up week. Yeah.
And the last one's going to be the Travis Kelce method, is drafting him in as your first round pick. And I call it the Kelce method because he's the only position where he's leagues above the people behind him. Just plain and simple. So when you think about doing this, is like you're saying, all right, I'm taking Travis Kelce as my first pick no matter what because I don't want to be fishing the waiver wire for tight ends. and that's what you do. It doesn't matter where you are. That's what you're doing. I've done this and I like this, and I'd be happy to do it this year too as well. But I'd be doing it more towards the 7th through 12th position, where your top running backs are gone and your top receivers are gone in the first 6 picks. So you take Travis Kelce, and you're happy with it because now you have the coveted position that everybody seems to lose weeks on by trying to play the waiver wire with a guy. I've done it. I like it. I'm not afraid to do it. This is probably one of my more favorite of the ones we've taken because it allows you to really pivot and play your league mates and play the draft more than the others do because you're not so stuck in a pathway of having to do something. So
I think last year there was probably one other year where I went like elite tight end. And it was Demaryius Thomas, not Demaryius Thomas. Julius Thomas, the year Peyton that I drafted Peyton won. And I did this last year with Kelce, but Kelce somehow fell to me in the second round, and I'm not.
Well, that's what happened to me when I won the championship that year. He fell to me in the second round, and it's like, if he's going to fall you in the second round, then you're winning. So
there are certain years where tight end is like just at a premium. Like there's maybe going to be 3 or 4 tight ends that are going to be relatively good, and then, but the difference with Kelce is that like there's Kelce, and then there's like a mile of crap, and then there's everyone else. Like Kelce is that far above everyone else, where he is essentially an elite receiver that's at your tight end position. Now I think this year is a year I might not even try for this and not even go and get Kelce unless he really does fall to me, because I think that there's a lot of tight ends this year. My counter to this is that if you do not do this strategy, I don't care if you get Mark Andrews or George Kittle or any of these next tier guys. If you don't get Kelce, you better be drafting 2 tight ends. Waste a late round pick on another tight end.
I wouldn't say draft 2 tight ends, but I'd say go for the guy you like the most late, and be prepared to be fishing the waiver wire, because I don't think you should waste a bench spot and a sleeper pick on a tight end. But I do think you're right. Like, be prepared to not be using the guy that you drafted as your tight end for the season.
Right. And if that's the case, if you miss out on like the top 6 or 7 tight ends, like just wait.
Yeah.
Because it's literally a coin flip for the rest of the guys. So like go wait, like get other players that are going to be better, that are going to produce week to week, but go and get a tight end in the 10th, 11th, 12th round.
And I think the biggest stat line too that speaks to this and how there's such a disparity at the position, and you're talking about it, is the fact that Mark Andrews has been tight end 5 twice. He's been tight end 1 and he's been tight end 2 in standard scoring. And the one time he was tight end 2 in 2019 is because he had 10 touchdowns. He had 1 season of 1,300 yards in 2021. Not even during Lamar Jackson's 2019 MVP campaign did he have 1,000 yards. Let's just put this in comparison. Last year, tight end 5 in standard scoring, tight end 4 in PPR, but tight end 5 in standard scoring, 73 receptions, 847 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And let's move over to Travis Kelce and just see the difference between the top and the number 5. There's no position that's like this in fantasy football. Travis Kelce, 1338, 12 touchdowns, 110 catches. It's not even close.
It's not even close.
So, Joe, if you're like, I'm just going to get one of the top 5 tight ends. No, you're really going to get Kelce, and then you're going to decide on who you feel comfortable with putting out there. And do I want to waste a 2nd or 3rd round pick on Andrews or Kittle or somebody who they may get 1,000 yards and they may hit double-digit touchdowns, but you're almost guaranteed that with Kelce.
There should never be 10 receivers that go before him. He's a top 10 receiver and the number 1 tight end.
Yes.
So if you miss out on Tyreek Hill, if you miss out on Justin Jefferson and Devontae Adams, well, guess what? You can make up for it by going and grabbing Travis Kelce.
But here's
So
my opinion. I'd rather have Travis Kelce than Devontae Adams this year. Like, that's me. That's my pick. I'd rather have Travis Kelce than CeeDee Lamb. Like, he's going to perform. He's going to perform the same as these guys are, if not better. He's the number one target on his team, on the most successful team in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
With arguably the best quarterback in the NFL right now. So, like, there's my argument for it, which is why going the King Kelce method, as I call it, is not a bad way to do it. I don't know if you should do it 1 overall. I mean, that's a bold move, Cotton, but I still think doing it is not a bad idea. Like, if I'm in the,
I wouldn't take him in the top 10 picks.
I would. That's my difference. I would.
Yeah, I mean I'd rather take a running back. That's my preference. Is I'd rather take a running back or one of the elite wide receivers there. And there's at least 10 guys there that I value more than I value him. No,
let's say this here.
I can make the argument.
Yeah. Well,
I'll agree with you. Whatever argument you want to make that he belongs there.
Yeah.
It's just not my preference.
It's just your preference. Yeah, that's fine.
It's just not my preference.
That's fine.
I'd rather take a running back there in the top 10. And if someone doesn't go with him and I get him in the second round, then great. But I personally value having running backs more so than even an elite tight end like Kelce.
He's got ADP of 5 right now.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, he's going right around Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp. He's going ahead of Saquon and Bijan and CD and Stephon and AJ and those guys.
Yeah, I mean, like the next tier of the wide receivers, I think that he belongs in that category with. Like I said, I don't think that there are 10 receivers that should be drafted over him.
No.
But
would you draft him over Derrick Henry? See, that's what I'm saying. It's like Derrick Henry was the number 3 running back last year. He had 1,500 yards, so he had 200 more yards rushing than Kelce had receiving, and he had one more touchdown. And then he had one more touchdown. That's what I'm saying. He only ran for 200 more yards and one more touchdown than Kelce did receiving.
I know.
So when you he had no receiving touchdowns, and he had 400 more yards in the receiving game. So let's say the yardage, yes, it's going to score him more, but the difference that you get at that position amongst everybody else in the league is far and above.
It is.
It just gets you thinking. I'm just making you think a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with, again, I can agree with every argument that you make. My preference is still going to go and get running back because I just feel that I can go, like I said, if I don't get Kelce, and every year I do this, I'll go and draft two tight ends, and I will roster 2 tight ends all season long. Because if the rest of your draft strategy is hitting, if the rest of your draft strategy is you're being consistent to, and you're filling your position at quarterback, and you're getting 2 running backs, and you're getting the middle tier wide receivers that are being consistent, then that the tight end position is a position that you can kind of mess around with between 2 guys. And you did it last year with Njoku and Everett, and you flexed some guys.
It worked.
In there.
It worked.
I did it for years with like having Hunter Henry.
I had Ingram at the end of the season. I grabbed him up when he was hot. Yeah. It can work. It's just tougher because it puts you in a position because
you need to play the waiver wire.
Yeah. But they could also miss. That's the thing. It's like the amount of times Kelce misses is very rare.
Yeah, Kelce has those blow-up games too. I mean, he had a 4 touchdown game last year. So he has a lot of those numbers get stacked into his multi-touchdown games were stacked. But if you look at actually late in the season, like I had him last year, and there were times where like I'm never gonna bench Travis Kelce. But there were times I was like, I don't really love this.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. He had 4 100-yard games. He had another 2 in 90s. But, yeah, he had 2 games of 57 yards, 56 yards each. And luckily one of them he had a touchdown. But, yeah, no, I mean, it's a tight end position. Don't get me wrong.
Exactly.
But that being said, you put yourself in an advantage. I'm gonna go through 4 different tips here. And these are tips and strategies, and you could chime in if you have anything else. And we don't need to dive into the details on them because they're pretty, self-explanatory. But these are where Chris and I have seen the most success in our drafts. And regardless of what strategy you like to take and what strategy you use, one of the biggest things is you still have to let the draft come to you, and you have to be able to adapt to the draft. Like Chris said, he wasn't planning on drafting Kelce last year. He was going to be happy with Kelce didn't, come to him because his draft strategy, he wanted that running back in the first round, and whoever was coming down to in the second round was who he was going to take. And all the mock drafts and all the talking we were talking about together, Kelce was never on his radar. And all of a sudden, boom, he's sitting there. He didn't get picked. Like, you are not going to skip on that, regardless if you're going for a zero RB or RB heavy, or you're going for whatever you need. Like, if you got an opportunity to grab somebody in a value position where they shouldn't be, you got to do it. Another one that I think too is, like Chris said before, start the trend, don't end it. Like, be the guy who grabs the first or second quarterback. Don't be the guy that's grabbing quarterback number 7 after everybody got eaten up before you. Or be the guy to grab the first tight end off the board and be Kelce, just like Chris did last year. Don't be the guy that's grabbing, Kyle Pitts and hoping that you got the last quote-unquote elite tight end. Stick to a plan. I think you have to take that with a grain of salt. I think it's good to stick to a plan, because if you have a plan, you have the guys you want to try and get on your team. And I do this every year. I'll write out all 15 rounds of my draft, and I'll say, this is the round I'm looking for a quarterback if I don't get XYZ. And I'm going to write down, this is the earliest I'm going to draft a defense. If nobody has drafted this top defense, I'll take them here. If these top 2 defenses are gone, I'm not going till the 14th round for a defense. Like, have a little bit of a plan and have a structure, because if you just go in there having a couple beers and hoping to do your best, like, you aren't going to have the ability to sit there and pivot properly because you didn't really think about that in advance. And then the last one I have here too is go for value. Don't just go for name, and don't go for the flashy. Like, go for value. If there's a guy that's sitting in front of you that's going to have better value on your team than a guy who's just a name, and we talked about Allen Robinson being drafted in the past over some of these other receivers, even though the value was better for the other receivers, but you were drafting Robinson based on his name and that he's the number one guy there, you're going to lose that probably more times than you're going to win that. And that happened to me with Mike Davis when he moved over to Atlanta after a great season with Carolina. He was a name there. He was flashy. He was the guy who was going to start the season there. And I drafted him in the 4th round, and it curbed me bad. So don't go for the flashy name. Go for the value who's sitting around you. You got any other things to add in sort of tips?
Yeah, I mean, just going like letting the draft come to you is a strategy that you should be implementing all the time. And I'll say this: doing this podcast and presenting the mock drafts to you guys to kind of see how we kind of think about it. This is going to be the most mock drafts that I've ever done leading up to a season. I don't like to do mock drafts. I don't think that they have an absolute ton of value. What they're great at is to see like the first 2 or 3 rounds, but after that, like, throw everything out the window, because there are going to be runs like when you're drafting with your league for the season, there's going to be runs on people, and you better be ready to be flexible enough to move off of whatever plan that you thought you were going to have and go and get, like Jono said, these are where you value players. This is where you're going to get them. If you start seeing a trend where that's all shifted up, you better move to shift up too. A great thing that I like to do, and just a nice tip to people out there, is go and take any one of these ADPs, right? Go take ESPN's ADP, or
Sleeper. Let's do Sleeper, because we love Sleeper.
We love Sleeper. Take Sleeper's ADP, print it off for like the top 50 or 100 people at each position, and then go in with the highlighter and tier your players off down the list. And you're going to start seeing that you're going to have a guy that's like 20th down the board that's on a higher tier than your guy that's at 12. So when you start seeing the trend go down, you're like, all right, well, I missed that top tier, but oh wait, I have a top tier here. And the next tier guys go, you're like, okay, well, other people aren't going to value him there, but I do. So go and draft that player. And it's a great visual cue. Like, I use highlighters, so I use different colors and tier my players out to where I know that I value this guy that might be like 50th ranked player, but I value him in my second grouping of players. So when my first group go, when my second group starts to dwindle, I know I got a guy in the bucket that I value over my third tier guys. So when my third tier guys start going, that second tier guy is next up on my list.
And
so,
I mean, that just goes right in line is like have a plan and stick to it. Like your plan is not necessarily to have a 0 RB or, hero RB plan. Your plan is like, I'm going to stick to my tiers list. And when that round comes around, I'm going to look to see who's still there and I'm going to take the value. And that's what we mean by stick to a plan. It's not necessarily have one of these plans that we talked about earlier. Those are just draft strategies that people can use. Your draft strategy just be stick to your plan.
And then just to be clear on my tight end list, if you want to know what it looks like every year, it's Travis Kelce with every highlighter going through it.
Every color.
He's the rainbow. He's the unicorn.
Yeah. So
no, but like everything else with the draft strategy, like we're talking about, like, let the draft come to you. When you're sitting there, like there's always going to be players that slide down, and you're going to forget about them. You're going to forget about them for a round or two, and then you're going to be like, this player wasn't drafted, and go and take him because if you valued him at a third round grade and he's there in the 5th round, go and take him. Like
it's a steal there.
It's a steal. So you see with value drops, always take the value and don't go with the flashy name. Like a lot of people like to draft rookies and they like to draft rookies early because they think they're going to make immediate impacts. And the truth of the matter is most of these rookies that come in don't make immediate impacts and they don't make big splashes. Not their rookie year. Like you might like them for the future. The way we draft is a little bit differently because we play in a keeper league. So
but still,
we
go for the rookies for that purpose. But we still in our first 6 rounds, everything we're talking about is into play.
Right. Like again, you can do the mocking drafts. It really helps you with that. Like first 3 rounds of planning. Like, all right, let me see what I can. If I go this player at this position, like let me see what I can get in the second round. Like realistically, and you go through enough simulations of it, and you're gonna be like, all right, well, realistically, it's gonna be between these 3 players, and which one do I like the best?
Yeah.
But those 3 players might not be there, and you might end up having a guy that you never even thought you'd have access to might fall there. So throw that plan out the window and go and take that guy. So like if let's just say you're drafting at the 5th position and you go and get Justin Jefferson, or you go and get Tyreek Hill, the 5th position, or Nick Chubb at the 5th position, and then you don't think you're going to have access to grabbing, Waddle at the back end. You thought he was going to be there, and you thought the players that were going to be there are going to be like AJ Brown and the Stephon Diggs, or it's kind of that lower end wide receiver 1 category. But then all of a sudden, like Waddle's there, and you're like, well, I'm gonna go and get him.
Yeah.
If a guy falls to you and they have a value, just go and get them.
Yeah. Now see that I'm very different. I do like 200 mock drafts because I love the actually doing mock drafts, and I get value out of it. Like you said, I get value out of the first 5 rounds. But I also know my league mates. That's why I get value out of the first 5 rounds. So I kind of understand like, oh, the computer or the random person I'm mocking with picked this person in the 4th round. Like, yeah, that's not happening in our league. We've only seen 2 quarterbacks go before the 4th round, like maybe every season except for like 1 where they went heavier. So like know your league and that. I like the mock drafting because it's a good tool, especially if you want to go with a plan to try the plan out and just see how it can work or how it could fail. But again, like, take all these tips and tricks, take them to some mock drafts, try them out, see what you like, see what you don't like. Leave a comment with if you have anything that we haven't mentioned that you think is a good tip or trick, or you think is a good strategy for your mock drafting, and let us know, and we'd be happy to test it out in our mock drafts. So again, next week
we'll test out strategies if you guys want us to. If you guys leave some comments and you say, hey, like I want to see you, draft, this way, we'll show you kind of what we look like and what it looks like. And Jono and I next when we do the mock draft, and we can kind of plan out 2 different strategies and try to stick to them and show you kind of what it will look like.
Yeah, and I think I'd be happy to do that next week. And, if no comments come in, I'll be happy to just pick one and everybody see it next week. So thanks for tuning in this week.
Leave a comment.
Yeah.
He'll cry. It'll be internally, but he'll cry.
I will not. I won't cry on camera. Um, thanks for tuning in this week. Tune in next week. Like I said, we'll have 2 special guests with us doing a mock draft. And we'll test out a couple different strategies and kind of show you what it looks like and with the tips and tricks we have. And you'll let us know at the end of that how we did and who you like better. So thanks for tuning in here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that notification button to get all the up-to-date videos when we drop them. Thanks, y'all.